But tonight we have a special guy, Josh Farley, and it just so happens that he and I have known each other for years because we used to work together at the Kitsap Sun newspaper. And so somehow one of our board members managed to corral him into, twisted his arm like crazy to get him here. And we're very grateful that he did. So what he's going to be talking to you tonight is about how Bremerton's Madrona Park, Madrona Trails actually was brought back from the brink during the pandemic by a group of very dedicated volunteers. This park is also very rich in Northwest plants and animals, but like so many others that we keep hearing about, it's almost on the brink again because of climate change. And just FYI, Josh recently became working as an editorial writer at the Seattle Times. I know. So if you're on Zoom, I'm addressing you again. So please ask any questions you have in the comment chat box. This program is being recorded and there will be a resource list provided on our website. And there's no test afterwards. So please welcome Josh Farley.
Thank you so much for having me, Barb. Yes, Barb Willick and I go back to at least 2005, I think. And gosh, she was a joy to work with. I treasured every day that we got to be together in the newsroom, and I'm back in a newsroom now, and I'm very happy about that. The first thing I just want to tell you is you get some incredible speakers, and so I'm shortchanging you a little bit in terms of my expertise on things. I am merely a curious person, maybe too curious. I love answering questions and finding out how things came to be and why things work the way that they do. It's just who I am, but I'm not an expert. I do my best to do my homework. If I don't have the answers, I try to find someone who can for you. So we are all going through this together. But this is something that I'm not only extraordinarily proud of, but for me, as we are doing this presentation in a place of a house of worship, for me, in many ways, my personal spirituality comes from forests. I get an immediate sense of peace and serenity when I go on a hike, and I'm very fortunate to live not too far from this 15.5 acre forest that we now today call the Madrona Trails. And I open with this picture because what you can see here is a stand of the trees, though, for which this great little park is named, the Madrona, Arbutus menziesii. And you can see a dense stand of them, which I've come to understand is not very common. It's not something that you see a lot. The Madrona tend to be more isolated in pockets. They like to grow on hillsides. They face the south often, but within Madrona Trails, for whatever reason, not only is there a lot of them in the entirety of the park, but particularly in the southern section closest to Wheaton Way, there is a very unusual stand of very tightly bunched Madrona trees. And I've never to this day found anyone that can explain exactly why. So I started doing my own research, and I have some hypotheses, but if you want to research even further or know someone in higher education who would like to explore this question, I would love that to happen. Immediately, this is a view you can take in if you go on the trails in the Madrona Trails. And it's almost tropical, right? You see the leaves, these are conifers, but are they? They have leaves, but they don't shed them every year. They have a bark that sheds, we think because the larva gets on it, and so it's some kind of defense mechanism, but we really know they meander towards the sky, and they can do things that other conifers just can't. You know, they are in search of sunlight. They bend literally sometimes over backwards to find their way to get the sun's rays. And in the process of doing so, I think they are one of the most beautifully artistic natural things that you ever see. So that is why I wanted to show you this. And this is a special view to me in the park. I encourage you, of course, to go out and find it. I also, as we get started, would tell you that anyone here and anyone on Zoom that wants to go walk these trails, you just tell me when and I'll be there. So I extend you that invitation. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next screen here. If I can get this to go. So let's back up though. Let's take it from the top here. Why are forests important? Most of you are probably well aware. They're the lungs of the earth. And our forests regulate water. Even long after a big rainstorm has come through, the drops of water sit on top of the leaves. They create an everlasting sort of percolation within the forest. So they do incredible things. They support, of course, amazing diversity, whether it's birds, what every kind of species lives within the forest. Indigenous peoples the world round, of course, rely on forests, as do we. I wrote much of the work that I've done as a journalist has been on paper. You're sitting in chairs right now. You look up, you're seeing wood everywhere. And so I just kind of wanted to do the basics because sometimes I think we forget how important they are. But we are losing our forests in the world today. Over the last 10,000 years or so, that you can count, about a third of the world's forests are gone. And more importantly, in the last 1 century, we've lost about half of that. So 12 million hectares or so are destroyed annually. And I take this picture right here. This is one of our oldest conifers within Madrona trails. You can see its bark here. Oops, I have a laser pointer. I should probably try it out here. Let's see if I can get it to work. Well, I don't need to on this one so much. You can see that this is really rugged bark on Douglas fir tree. Very, very old Douglas fir here. One of the theories that I've been told by foresters of why they get like that is because it creates more surface area, so there's resistance to fire. You know, and these old growth trees, what do we lose when they're gone? If any of you have read, and I certainly highly recommend it, Suzanne Samart's book Finding the Mother Tree from British Columbia. She's done incredible research on mycorrhizal networks. This is really the idea that there's almost like, in a way, an analog would be like the internet flowing underground. So you have the heavens above, the sun comes down and creates within the trees. You get phosphate that flows into the ground. Once it gets to a connector point with these mycorrhiza, you have of course, nutrients and water coming up, and they meet. And not only that, but trees actually do a distribution they can be cooperative. And there's a lot of emerging research around this, but her book is far better at explaining this than I am. I'd certainly encourage you to check it out. So we're losing our forests, though. That was my initial point here. And as we go to the next page, we need urban forests for critters like this guy. We were doing a work party one day and a whole bunch of raccoon came through. Of course, there's raccoon. There are deer, again, there are birds, there's all kinds of critters, even within something so small as the Madrona trails. This is just 15 acres. And so what's up with that? Why do I point out urban forests? Well, it's very simple. We need our big forests, but we also need our little forests. And we have seen, and there's emerging research on this too, that if you're familiar with or have read about the concept of heat islands, right? So places like Seattle, or frankly, downtown Bremerton, there's a lot of concrete. And unfortunately, some of our most marginalized communities, when you put I-5 through the middle of an inner city, for instance, which happened all over the country, you are putting concrete that sunlight comes off of it and makes it much hotter. All right, everybody out in Zoom land, you can hear me okay? Okay. The only thing is I don't know where I can talk, and I lost track of where I was, which is not uncommon. Just ask my wife. Or any of you probably have figured this out about me. Okay, so we need urban forests. I'll pick this up again just to reiterate. This is East Park, 1940s housing. Federal government rushed to get in there, but they did not develop the East Park nature preserve is what it was called, or nature reserve, was the 15.5 acres. And like I said, I think that's probably due to the topography that they didn't touch it, they left it. And what's neat about this is after some of the work that we did in the forest, I've reconnected with people who used to live in Bremerton at basically through the 40s and 50s and 60s, 70s, and even 80s. And this was, you know, if my generation, and you know, this is where you played. This was whatever kids do nowadays. The woods is where I played. I grew up playing in the woods, and the people that live in this area, this is where this was their outdoors. This was after school, you went and ran around in the woods. And so I kind of love that, and I feel like communities need that. They need places for people to just get off your screen for 5 minutes, right? You got to get out and enjoy nature. And so for me, that was a big draw of why this forest is so important, and why urban forests are so important is you don't have to drive to the Olympics to see fascinating nature in the Pacific Northwest. You can literally step off a sidewalk in some cases and you're in the woods. How cool is that, you know? So we keep going. Now we're going to focus in on the Madrona. So I've taken some pictures here. Again, what you would not think of a conifer, carnivorous, is this meandering tree that reaches for the sky and can twist and turn in every possible directions. Again, Arbutus menziesii gets its name from the nomenclature comes from Menziesii was Archibald Menzies, who was also, he got the Douglas fir tree, Pseudotsuga menziesii. He was on the George Vancouver expedition when they came into what was named on that expedition as Puget Sound in 1792. So that's where the species name comes from. But what's interesting about Madrona, and as those of you who know, is that it kind of has three different names. It resembled in from Europe kind of a strawberry tree, or a madroño. And so you see the three names there. Arbutus, it gets its name from the genus. And when you go north of the border in British Columbia, they won't know what you're talking about necessarily if you say Madrona. They know Arbutus. In Washington, for the most part, I've encountered this called a little bit different. We go by Madrona. But if you go down to California, a lot of Californians will call it Madrona. And Oregon. And Oregon too, as well. Exactly. So it gets kind of a different name. But the point of all of that is, if you look at a map between the Inside Passage, Sunshine Coast of British Columbia, all the way down to almost San Diego, is the only place in the world you will find Madrona trees. Are we good? Okay. Make sure. Okay. Yep. I see everybody online, so that's good.
Josh, yeah. Conifer, or implies cones or something?
Yes.
How is this a conifer?
Yeah, well, exactly. So that is an excellent question, and beyond my pay grade for tonight's presentation. But I will tell you that it has these beautiful urn shaped white flowers that when it drops, if you've walked through Madrona trails in the springtime, it's almost like you're going through a wedding procession or something. They're so pretty. And then in the fall it berries. And yes, that's indicative not necessarily of conifers, right? And so it has these beautiful red berries in the fall that come down. They were indigenous peoples, and the Salish peoples would eat them. They're very fibrous. They don't taste the best. But you got to experience it. I mean, at least once in your life, right? So they do fall off, and they are quite prolific when they do so. So yeah, let's go to the next. So the Madrona Trails in 2015 was rebranded. Unfortunately, not everybody understood the branding effort. But what ends up happening, and I'm a little loose with the dates here, but the city council did create it and made it Madrona Trails. I think that was a very positive move. East Park Nature Reserve, leaves a little bit to the imagination, I suppose. What does that mean? But it truly is Madrona Trails. And we have a very, very talented, we were very lucky as a city to have Colette Berna, who is a parks planner. She's redone many of the parks in the city that we enjoy, in Lions Park and Kiwanis Park, etc. But there was an effort to make some trails. I mentioned on our break, John Stanley, who's a doctor at the hospital. There'd been some efforts to kind of get the trails going. I'd be remiss if I did not mention also the Boy Scouts, Eagle Scouts, that did a number of projects. But unfortunately, what happened was, I think with the development of the new housing, for a long time, the area was just cleared and there wasn't a lot going on up there. And so when one of my first story walks at the Kitsap Sun, it was the second one, I think, we went into Madrona Trails, and it was in 2015. We go walking up there, and some people kind of went off on their own, and they found a few encampment spots and hundreds, maybe more, probably more, of drug needles. It was not a pretty scene. That got cleaned up, but it kind of became a revolving door of things that shouldn't have been happening in a community forest. So tons of trash. The other thing I would say is, this is in no way placing blame here, but there was a very popular smoke bench by Harrison Hospital. And whoever was going out for a cigarette, that is the picture right there. There was a garbage can at the entrance that is now on the Hickory, what is the Hickory Avenue side, so close to the hospital, was just overrun with trash as well. So one of the things that I truly believe, I think there was, if you're familiar at all with the broken windows theory, you can take or leave the way that it has been used, but one of the things that I do believe in is, if we as a society, as a city, as people view your landscape as a trash can, people use it as a trash can. They will throw out bottles, they will throw out garbage and things like that. If you keep things clean, if you keep things tidy, I had a friend, my friend Brent, told me once, he talked about, he took his family to a fancy hotel once, and he noticed that his children really were well behaved, but if they went to a Motel 6, it wasn't like that. They were squirrely, they kind of went all over. But the nice hotel, the one that was very clean and dapper, and I thought, I wonder if this applies here in any way, shape, or form. Like I said, no expert on this stuff, but what I have noticed is when the trails are clean, people do not throw garbage on the ground. If they do, we clean it up quickly, and we have a nice, clean, tidy forest for people to enjoy. It makes everyone feel safer too, when you don't have things, particularly things like drug needles. These are not things that want to make you want to coax, bring your whole family in for the day, right? So we really, the effort that we started, that I will talk about here next, was to get all of this trash out. So you've probably seen the picture of the typewriter. Remember the day we all joked about that someone was back in there writing the next great American novel in the woods. That is in the middle is a dishwasher from, I would guess, probably like 60s vintage, although I am, again, no dishwasher expert here, but it was very heavy and hard to haul out. We've had wonderful volunteers that have come out of the woodwork to help us. Some of you that are in this room right now that have helped us. I made a friend named Brandon Redinger, who was absolutely instrumental and often still hikes the trail with me, that we just really got down to business of cleaning things up and and the picture on the right is, I can't tell you how much carpeting we hauled out, how many tires we have hauled out. But that was all, I'm sure it was all East Park housing carpet, and it kind of looks shag carpet-ish kind of thing. So yeah, it'd be cool now if only it hadn't been in the woods for 40 years or whatever. But it was quite an effort. We spent many cleanups. I have to thank Peninsula Bible Fellowship came out, so church groups. We had the sailors from the USS Theodore Roosevelt, when the Roosevelt was, was it I think it was the Roosevelt, that came out and helped us. We've had Eagle Scout groups, many from our community, and the list goes on and on. People just, once we were kind of dialed in on this, and this all really happened in the pandemic in 2020. And so for whatever reason, in 2020, I just really wanted to do something major with this park. I really felt like it had a lot of potential. And so, as I've told you, that the list goes on and on. But what ended up occurring was I noticed that the community snowballs, and I say this a lot in community presentations, but people need stuff. They need stuff to do. If you're not going to have them on their phones, you got to get them out and doing stuff. And Kevin Koski is a definite believer in that. He is an amazing individual who has hiked the Pacific Crest Trail. He's even hiked the Four Corners and is working on creating a trail around the states that are the Four Corners in the Southwest. Amazing guy, shipyard engineer, is brilliant. And when we got things finally cleaned up, again, pandemic times, it was so strange even being around people for a little while there, right? In the early days of the pandemic into 2020, 2021, but we could be in the forest together. It became very clear early on, like outdoors, how great is this? And that we could still get together. And so in Common Cause, Kevin and Brandon and I often, and some others, but we really started to tackle how do we make this trail network better? Because what we found was there was crazy uphills and downhills. And again, working with this idea that if you keep a nice, tidy trail network for everyone to enjoy the trails, how do we attract as many people as possible? Because the more and more people that are families, hikers, runners, what have you, that are using it for recreation and for the good, the people who maybe want to go, I'll just say it, shoot up in the woods, are not going to be attracted to do so. They're not going to want to be around that element. And then of course you have the housing that started. So this is ultimately the network that we created. There were some trails that were already here, but I can tell you in large portion, this down here is a trail that did not exist. Up here, we made a loop. So what we tried to do, and this is, according to Kevin and others that I met, and again, never done anything like this before, what we were really trying to do was, if you went into the woods, another thing that's disorienting is when you're by yourself or in the forest and all of a sudden you turn around and you're lost. That's not a pleasant feeling. We want people to feel secure and confident. So we created essentially a 1.5 mile or so loop around the woods. So if you just stayed on the main trail, you'd find your way back to your car, you'd find your way back to your home, no matter where you lived in the entire network. So it was really important to us to give people that confidence that they could use it. And then last but not least, this is maybe my favorite thing about the work that went into this and the community and how many hours people put in, is that basically every trail in there now is about less than 8% grade. So that means I have walked with people in their 80s, and I've walked with people who are 4 or 5 years old, and all of them can do it. And to me, creating an accessible, it's not, you try your best. You go so far when you're dealing with dirt paths, of course, but to make this something that everybody can use is like, that's what gives me goosebumps. Is when I see people in there who maybe are more vulnerable, who maybe are older. That's really what is special to me.
And what are the reasons for the different colors of path?
Oh, sorry. So yes, the different colors of the path are, the green is the main loop. I should have said that at the beginning. The reds are exits where you can come in and out. And then the orange or yellowish paths are crossover trails. So you can actually make your way through the middle if you want to. We actually closed a few trails because, again, you don't want it to be too confusing, but we wanted to make sure that people could get across if they needed to get across, and that's what the different colors are. So the other thing, of course, that we're talking a lot about is our effect on the environment. The species that we have grown to love, sometimes they come back to bite us. And these are 4 species that I would say are the worst offenders, at least when it comes to Madrona trails. So the Scotch broom, of course, don't get me started. But we try to pull it up by the roots. It's not shade tolerant, so it mainly exists on the exterior, but Himalayan blackberries also not so much in the middle, but they get in everything. And English ivy, and holly. Interestingly, holly will grow. We found holly inside this forest. I can't tell you how many we took out that were at least 50 feet tall. I mean, they had bases like conifers, like this big around, and just massive. And there were whole areas that once we got the holly out, it opened up huge patches of canopy. Then guess what's growing there now? We're starting to see the effects of younger conifers taking off that are taking over this area. So like that, but it's a never ending battle. Never it will. I will fight ivy until the day that I die. And then hopefully someone else will pick up the fight, because English ivy, and this is what you're seeing on this tree. Who knows how long? I mean, I really could not tell you 40 years, 50 years, maybe more, that ivy was growing on this tree. Ivy is, though, I have to admit, as an enemy, I'm fascinated by the enemy. It will go up the entire tree, and then it creates what's called a sail, I have learned. And that sail, of course, soaks up all the sunlight. So it doesn't exactly kill the tree, but it does choke the tree. It does not, it puts pressure on it. But the main ways in which ivy is really, really bad for conifers is, imagine how much weight that is if you were to go up the tree. And I think I have more pictures of it later on in the presentation. We'll get to that. So the nice thing about it is if you see it on a tree, you just lop it at your head height or so. And then you create what's called a ring of life down at the base. If you can clear it all out. So it will take a while for it to come back, because it will come back. But if you can do that, then your conifers stand a fighting chance. And in a windstorm, that is really what ivy can do damage in. It's so much weight on the tree, and it will bring trees down. So that's when we got there, you had ivy coming in from all directions, and all four of these species were really sort of starting to choke the middle. So what we tried to do with that's another benefit of the 1.5 mile loop, is it creates something of a fire line, and we prioritize this stuff on the inside of the trails. So we had sort of a delineation there, and everything on the inside. Hey, let's make this our line. We're not going to let, if we can, we're going to get rid of all the invasive species that we can. And I would, if you find a holly in there, I'll buy you a chocolate bar. If you find any ivy growing on trees, there's very few. And so we really have tried to do our best to cut down on that. In terms of ivy abatement, also kind of funny, the rich history of Bremerton, as it pertains to the World War II era, was surfaced one great ivy removal project. This entire block, which stands up to about me on my waist, you could not see it. It was completely covered. You can actually still in this photo see the ivy tracks on top of it there. So when we went to town on the area that's just down by Wheaton Way, lo and behold, here is this glorious piece of history that I had some ideas on it, but I did call and ask some people, and I looked around, and if you look around Bremerton, you will still see these there, called barrage balloon anchors. Of course, after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, Bremerton was widely viewed as being next. A lot of people don't realize that, but when if an invading force was coming in by plane, the pilots would not be able to see these massive steel cables that would attach to a hydrogen-filled balloon. And they would add a grenade for good measure on the bottom of the hydrogen balloon. And when the plane came in, it would hit the cable, the aviator would not see it, grenade would come down, and you know what happens next. So they were essentially a ring of defense around the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard and Bremerton Navy Yard, as it was doing very, very important work. So that is one of the legacies that we have right here. There's nothing marking it right now. I would certainly love to commemorate it in some way, so for posterity, as we move forward. So another thing about getting rid of invasive species, you might find some buried treasure. It's kind of fun. So the other cool thing about 15.5 acres, again, I mentioned the fact that it is a relatively small forest, but when you go through it and you you basically go stand after stand. The picture here I've taken is actually probably just some erosion over where a Douglas fir has grown. You can see how rugged that bark is, but it almost looks like an octopus. It's a really cool tree. It's in the very north of the park. If you're in there, it's very cool to see. But there's a big stand of Douglas fir. There's a lot of hemlock that grow together. They all kind of, and there's a cedar grove just south of the octopus tree. We have a big deciduous section, maples and alders mostly. It's a huge alder that is unfortunately on its way out. It's dying, but it's probably, I'm trying to think, if I were to estimate, I can't. It's a huge tree. You got to see it to believe it. And then of course the Madrona. And there's a couple of places where there's the largest Madrona I found in there, 128 inches around. And that's not one of those, I call them, sometimes Madrona like to do the thing where they grow one or two one or two leaders. Sometimes they have a tripod, sometimes they do a quad, like a quadplex or something. But I did not measure those. This is just an individual 1 liter Madrona, absolutely huge and breathtaking. So let's zoom in here on Madrona, how they grow. So I already mentioned this a little bit earlier. And essentially, when you have a young start, they almost look like rhododendrons, don't they? When they're getting going, they kind of have that, but they're very picky about where they grow. Again, they've actually been viewed in terms of climate change. There's pros and cons with climate change with Madrona. From what we understand so far, heat, again, they don't like standing water. They like to have runoff. They want to be able to get their water, but not have it hang around. And so they maybe in climate change, that's not a bad thing. Unfortunately, severe weather events, if we get a lot of snow, if we get a lot of frost, they tend to have a harder time with that. So there's some good news and some bad news there. And again, once they get to a certain height, they fight their way to the top of the canopy. They need to find a way to get that sunlight to survive. And again, I bring up that they're kind of a work of art. I went to, maybe Brian, you can help me with, there is a house of worship on Bainbridge Island that our monks belong to. There's some monks that work with the Ground Zero Center for Nonviolent Action. They have Madrona as the beams within their shrine. It's absolutely incredible. So I don't need to tell you, it also is one of the densest woods, and if you have a fire, there's probably nothing that burns for longer than Madrona. It is a wonderful firewood too. It keeps us warm. So it's a most unusual conifer. It doesn't drop its leaves, as I mentioned, every year. It sheds its bark when larvae comes, and I suppose the species must view it as some kind of a problem. And so it sheds it, but the shedding of its bark and the multicolors that you see, almost pink, and like that last one we just saw, look at that color. I mean, and the knots that are created within the wood. I mean, it's like literally, it is just the coolest wood. And you get so much of it on a quick hike through Madrona trails. So it is most unusual. Shoot, I revealed my thesis too soon. But this is one of my main theories. And again, if you prove me wrong, I would be grateful, or prove me right, either way. But what you find in Madrona trails is there's kind of this, there's probably 3 ridges topographically through there. It's one of the challenges of making it a relatively flat trail is because of that. And you can see it. I'll just quickly go back so we can take a peek here one more time. You can see in how the switchbacks that we had to create, you have essentially one and then another and another and there is one area particularly right here where the trail goes right through that, up here, right through all the way to the hospital. It looks like there was a creek there. My guess is that in the 40s, when they created this development, lots and lots of fill go against the edge. And then they probably put some kind of storm drainage here, but it cut off the supply of water that was flowing through there. And you can see evidence of it. It doesn't, the ground doesn't grow as much. I think there's some evidence, I guess, that there was some kind of surface water that would, like a drainage that was flowing through there at that point. Okay, going back here. So that's my guess again, the hydrology of the area. has probably contributed in some fashion, because at the very south end, it is just almost nothing but madronas. There's a few scattered in, fir trees, a few other species, but not a whole heck of a lot else. And it is, to me, it's majestic. It's absolutely beautiful. And madronas are members of the Ericaceae family. Sometimes heather is another name that is used. I mentioned already the urn-like flowers in the spring, the red berries of the fall. I call them partners. So this is, again, me reading in. Please do not take this at any level of scientific value, but let's just say I find interesting this observation that Ericaceae family members include huckleberry and salal. So knowing what we know about what Suzanne Simard has found in Canada and elsewhere, it is interesting that the Ericaceae family oftentimes is sort of partnering. If you go to this very dense cluster of madrona trees, what you find at the base is huckleberry and salal. Unfortunately, in around areas of the park, they are very much under threat by the ivy and the blackberries that are coming in. And this is one of our most important areas for when we have our monthly work parties. We get neighbors and people out there. We're trying to push back against that. We want to do everything we can, particularly to save this. And to really grow the visibility of this. There is I will also mention there, if you're interested in joining up the cause of madronas, there's the Arbutus Army, and I can give you that link. If you do a quick Google search, though, you'll find them. They care deeply about madronas. There is some research going on, and I have been trying to kind of increase the connective tissue between the organization, and I'd like to get them out here to see this, because I really want to confirm what I've taken a few foresters who tell me this is really unusual to have this. So it's not that I haven't brought them, but I want to get this bigger organization out here.
Josh,
Yes.
does the bark ever go back? Once it peels off, is that always gone then?
I don't think so. It seems to me like it doesn't grow back. Another layer sort of peels, but
Yeah.
exactly. And that's been only my observation, but
It colors, it saps its red color, it gets grayish, brown again, and then the next year it
Yeah.
peels off
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
It's red.
it's such a fascinating species. There's just so much we don't know. I think that's part of the allure of them. So you can see there's I think that's a madrona there on the left, but this is a Douglas fir, and that is a woodpecker, right? Exactly. So one of the things I've really enjoyed in the last couple of seasons now, I walk the trails almost every day, if not every day. And of course do a trash run, make sure there's nothing that we need to alert the city about. And I can tell you almost never, I think in the last 3 years or so, we've had maybe a handful of times we'd have to come in and do a major garbage pickup. So that's been really, really wonderful. But another thing that I love to do now, and if you haven't introduced yourself to there's an app for that. If you're familiar with the Merlin app, I find birding to be intimidating. Trees, there's like what, 5 to 10, 15 dominant conifer species. You kind of acclimate yourself to them. You see them, it reinforces the memory. Birds, it's like, oh my gosh, there's like how many species of birds are there? And I have a friend, Vic Olsch, who I learned a lot about the maintenance we do here from Vic and the volunteers in the Illahee Preserve. And that is a magnificent forest as well. But Vic is a master birder and he knows all of these. I was so impressed. But it's intimidating. So now there's an app. If you download Merlin, it's free. Cornell University made it, and you just put it up. It plays the song. It puts it on a digital graph, and it can identify pretty much instantaneously all kinds of birds that come through. So what I've loved to do the last few years is monitor kind of monitor in a very loose sense, just enjoy nature and just watch the migration of things like northern flickers, of things like Pacific slope flycatchers. And I just sort of let my nerdiness all hang out. It's amazing. I have loved getting to know some of the different bird species, but I've always been intimidated by it. And now there's a free way to go through any forest space that you have, and be able to do that. Yes.
I am on the board of Kitsap Sun.
Oh, great.
Yes, and
I love
am there
Yeah.
The birds are one of what you haven't mentioned is that the Madrona tree, those fruits are really a great source of food,
Yes.
particularly for birds that eat berries, robins, flickers, and
Buick's Wren, we get a lot of those.
yeah, and
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, they're a great source of food. I happen to have a backyard that has several huge madronas.
Yeah,
And it's like a festival in there.
that's great.
Feeding festival.
Yeah.
So if you have madronas, keep them. They're a great source of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and they sometimes, if you can transplant a young Madrona tree, they don't transplant. That's the point. People say that they do. I think they're lying. No, there may be a way, but they're very difficult. They pick where they want to grow on the ground. We're almost here to the end. And I bring this picture back because this is a view that you can take in. And I want to leave you with this, that all of these different reasons. So for climate change, our forest, and this forest in particular, it's a carbon sink. And in terms of climate change, it's an invaluable oasis in a city where you can step off and literally be in the forest, playground for children and families. It's a source of stress relief. And I mentioned this earlier, that I can literally go into this woods and I've never not come out feeling a little bit lighter, feeling a little bit better. And I wonder, and I've started thinking about this, and I'm sure you have too. When you take a hike and you're around species that are so much bigger than you are, they live so much longer than you do, half a millennia sometimes, the trees. And there's like this, to me, it's like a temporal, like tranquility that I think sort of overwhelms me, that everything in my life, the stresses and the things just melt away when you're around, when you're in the presence of these conifers. And this is a really special part. And I wanted to leave you, before we take some questions, with, it was this very view that I took my father to this spot, and he saw that I was so into this woods and everything a few years ago, and he unfortunately passed away last year. And so there's a really profound sense I get, because it was at this very spot that he looked, and my father and my mother started a tree nursery in Oregon. I grew up on a farm outside of Wilsonville, Oregon, which is a little I-5 town just south of Portland. And so he was a nursery owner all his life, but when he turned, and it was very rarely showed a lot of emotion, but he looked at this view. He looked at this one in particular, and the stand of Madronas, and he said, "That's the view right there. That's it. That's the one." And so for me, it's personal, and we can't lose this forest, and it tells us so much about our community. It's so important in our community, and I appreciate you just wanting to listen to me talk about this very special piece of my heart. And so thank you for letting me share.
Right now, there's no questions from the people.
Good.
And we can take questions here, but either I or we're going to have to repeat your questions. Josh might repeat them for the Zoom audience.
Okay. Well, I would be happy to. Yes, Brian.
How do we get involved in the volunteer efforts?
Oh, well, that's easy. We have a Facebook page, Friends of Madrona
Oh, the
Trail.
question was, how do we get involved in the volunteer of
I wrote the rule. First rule of Zoom comments. Repeat the question. Yes. So how can you get involved? We have a Facebook group, the Friends of Madrona Trails, if you like that page. If you don't want to do that, you can also, we have a growing email list, so that goes out to the volunteers every month. And I would be more than happy to take anyone's email who would like to come out with us. And as I said before too, I'm happy to give any of you my email, phone number, if you want to just go on a hike someday too. We don't have to do any work. We can just appreciate the Madronas and the rest of the forest.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, go ahead. No, go back. Yeah, go ahead.
What degree is there a disease? I had a big Madrona in
Oh, yeah.
my yard, and it was just all the leaves were spotted yellow, and it was really
And
struggling.
black, yes, it almost looks like a burned damage. There's a fungus that has been attacking the species.
How about this forest?
We're just talking about all the things that can affect the Madrona trees. I'm gonna stand here, and you talk and
Yeah,
come on.
I'm too excited. I get too excited. Okay, let's try again here. Okay, so there are many issues, and Paul raised a good point about what in particular you have a tree in your yard that says it appears to be suffering from something. Yes, there's some funguses that are known to attack madronas. I used to think this was a much bigger problem in this forest. Not so much. I can tell you in terms of what brings a madrona down in madrona trails, we have a couple of different things. I would say, first of all, when they come down, they often take others with them, like in many forests. But the meandering nature of the way they grow, if you go for a walk through there, you'll see many that are lying on the ground. And what's beautiful, of course, is then they become nurse logs, and of course the forest renews itself in this very beautiful artistic way, I think. But the other way is laminated root rot. I hope I'm saying that right. Essentially the base of the tree just becomes almost like this. A madrona is such a strong tree, and it just becomes almost flaky, and eventually the integrity of the whole tree just comes down, and it looks like it's ripped apart. It's like you could literally put a spoon in and like spoon it out. So not really sure how we so much battle that. Again, I think that may be part of the hydrology issue. These are very sort of temperamental trees when it comes to a lot of water around. And I wonder if when we have big rain events, there may be an impact there. So possibly.
I want to ask one quiz, but because you said about the berries, you can eat them. Can you really?
Yes, you can. Yeah, I can live to tell the tale. Yeah, there's certain berries you don't want to eat. Yeah, now maybe I didn't bring a waiver of liability here tonight, so maybe I'll take my word for it. But I have eaten many of these, and I still stand before you so far. So
Over here? Yes, Helen.
When you first started talking about holly there, it triggered a memory for me, because when I moved to Manette, and holly was just growing in my yard, and I remember my dad saying there's an old holly farm there somewhere, I think more up towards Sylvan than down in Manette, but somewhere around there, because it's spread everywhere. I mean, I have some in my yard now over by Sylvan.
yeah,
So everywhere you go, it is just
it
from that one farm.
does, and it is on.
The comment was about holly is everywhere.
Should we get rid of them if we have them?
Is holly everywhere? Yeah, I mean, I guess it's up to you. Should you get rid of holly if and I would say, I view them for a forest like this, they are competing for canopy, and they will shade a huge swath of forested territory. As I said, we went through, there's one place in Madrona Trails particularly where the ivy was coming up all the trees. It almost, if you could have sped up time, it's almost like a tsunami wave coming in where you have all of the ivy that's totally fine to just go along the bottom. It starts to go up the trees. Eventually it will bring down the trees, and then the holly take over, and we would just have stands of holly with ivy on the ground. And sometimes it's fun because you actually see ivy growing up the holly. And I thought, well, at least then you taste of your own medicine. But yeah, it's not great, and it spreads because of course the birds eat berries and what have you. So to me, like we look in here and
You can come back here.
okay. You put me where you want me.
There you
Okay.
go.
All right. Oh yeah. Okay. I forget this is what.
Yeah, they like to see.
Okay.
There was a question over here.
Well, kind of segues into a bunch of different things. I started like meandering through the trails after I met John Albers.
Oh, great.
From Albers
Yeah.
Music Gardens, and
Wonderful.
He had commented that our madrones are in trouble. And the first thing I noticed when I was hiking in there, it was probably, I'm assuming it's due to the Scotch broom, the all the invasive species. because there weren't a lot of cedars in there.
Hmm.
But
Interesting.
very little funguses, like
Hmm.
mushrooms, no mushrooms, hardly any mushrooms.
Interesting.
There are some, but I noticed that, and I'm happy that you brought up Suzanne Samard because she was one of our guest speakers at the Myco Club.
Oh,
But there
cool.
are a lot of fungus that have symbiotic relationships and mycorrhizal relationships with Madrone,
Good point. Yeah.
and I don't see them here.
Yeah.
I've checked.
Okay. Well, so I can tell you.
So,
And this is
Yeah.
about mushrooms in the
Yes.
forest.
Okay, well, we're talking about mushrooms in the woods. Yeah, yes. I can tell you that this is an excellent time to, as you are well aware, to go through there. I just found some purple jelly disc. Is that what it's called? I think the
Creepy ones.
yep, and witch's brew.
Which is butter.
Witch's butter. Excuse me, witch's butter.
Saccharomyces, yeah.
And so there are more than like right now there's a lot, and it's growing on a lot of the fallen Madrona, which I
Yeah,
which I-
and I
it's
was
interesting.
looking for more mycorrhizal relationships.
Yeah,
as
gotcha.
Opposed to decomposers.
Got it.
So,
Got it. Okay.
I think that now that maybe the holly, you know, we don't have the holly and as much ivy,
Mhm.
that it might start coming back and then it'll be a healthier forest.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, I keep looking for, like, there's some specific mushrooms that associate with Madrone.
Oh, awesome.
specific
Okay.
Madrone.
Can we go
The
for a walk?
question is that,
Yeah.
yes, there's a really good expert, mushroom expert that's asking the questions. And it's all about mushrooms, so.
Okay. Yeah, let's go for a walk.
And
Let's-
Suzanne would have told you that, you know, a healthy forest includes this mushroom mycelium.
Yeah.
Because it carries the nutrients to the trees
I see.
and breaks stuff down for it.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to actually put you on the spot for a second.
Okay.
How accessible is this trail?
How accessible are we talking? Great point.
to
That's a great point.
scooters and wheelchairs, and if it's not, would you be willing to work on accessibility?
Within the, so, okay, first question is, no, it's, I would say we're not there. And it's in the topography of the spot is tricky. I would not want anybody to get stuck in somewhere in the woods. And it still rolls up and down. I think it's pretty darn good though, and we could try. I certainly though, within the means that we have available, want to continue to, a friend of mine, that I mentioned earlier, Brandon, we joked that what we tried to do with the width of the path was if, we imagined that there would be, two people with freshly baked pies on the trail, and they were passing each other. And would they have enough room? Would we create a path big enough that the two people could pass each other with their pies? So we actually did open up quite a bit. I unfortunately am not very well versed in sort of the power of like electric wheelchairs and things like that. And but I'm certainly willing to go with you and see how we would do sometime. I would love to try it, and I would love to continue making as many improvements as we possibly can within our means to continue.
Well, I'll be contacting you.
Great. Okay.
Oh,
Sounds good.
the only other comment from the audience, the Zoom audience, was, will you stand in front of the camera?
Okay, good.
But are there any other questions? But, oh, wow. Yes, over here.
Oh, I have a question about safety.
Okay.
Just because when I moved back to Gannett a year ago.
Yeah.
A couple people mentioned the Madrona trails, but they said, but don't go alone.
Okay.
And I know you've done a lot of work on it because it's previously,
Sure.
not a safe place, and that's why you found it, but do you feel like it's safe enough where you would still recommend people going in a group or not really going alone, or what do you think?
I would. I think that first of all, we all know that personal safety is something relative and sacred to us. And if you can't feel comfortable, if you think that there's a risk in the woods, then you're defeating the purpose of going to the woods, I think. You know, I think everybody has to go into the mindset of in a way that they feel comfortable. So yeah, I would never say no, don't do, you know, if you want to go on a solitary walk by yourself, what I have witnessed, what I have seen is that within this woods, it's very uncommon that you come across somebody who again may be in there for nefarious needs such as drug addiction. It's just not really happening. At the same time, we've all witnessed in our community and elsewhere, all over Kitsap County, all over Washington State, a huge rise in people who don't have housing and people who are have drug addictions, and it's a really sad thing. And I'm not saying that going out into the woods that I think you'd be fine, but go with what you're comfortable with.
One more.
Truly.
Sorry. What about dogs? Because you didn't mention, can I take my dog to walk or a dog's not?
Absolutely.
Our dogs
Our dogs
allowed.
allowed in the Madrona trails. Yes, just like any park, they are absolutely allowed. There's doggy bags at the trailheads.
On a leash, on a leash. though.
And on a leash. Yes, on a leash.
On
yeah.
this side, there was one.
Yeah.
Was it?
Well, I've walked from Wheaton Way and sometimes I sort of end up in like dead ends, or, I haven't figured out those trails. Somehow they don't make sense to me. I don't know if I'm starting in the wrong place. Cause are the trails also behind Schley? I guess it would be behind the ice arena or?
No, that's the other side. That's Schley
The other
Canyon. Yeah, so this is, that would be over by the ice arena. That's a different, essentially that's the McDougal Creek or some
Okay,
people.
cause there's
That's a
some kind of
different-
sign there, but I've gone up there and.
Yeah.
sort of-
Yeah, no, and again, I'd be happy to take you and show you the loop. That one thing left that we haven't quite made Illahee Preserve does a really good job with this. They use kind of these stakes that have numbers on them that you look up, oh, I know where I am now. And there's a much bigger, much more intricate loop at Illahee Preserve, of course. But what I really want to do that we haven't done yet is, if I can go, let's see if I can still do this. Yes. If I can go back to the loop. So at each intersection of what I'd like to do, you don't even need a map at each intersection, but just a main loop trail marker. And I haven't been able to get a funding or find a quick solution that would work really well. But essentially at each spot, if all you would need is just something to say, oh, this is not the main loop. If you know when you go in that at every single intersection, main loop, arrow pointing this way, main loop, arrow pointing this way. If you stay on it, you'll come back to the same spot, like a clock, right? Just go all the way around, counterclockwise or clockwise. And so that's really the addition I would like to do. And if you have any ideas on how we can do that well, how we can create that, I'm all ears for suggestions.
And the library has maps, it's the city park trails or some city.
I don't know what it is. Same with Illahee Preserve for me, I have no recollection of PI 16 and 53, and it doesn't mean anything. I mean, that doesn't tell me, oh, I need to walk on this one and then I'm gonna get to 18 or I'm gonna get to 36 or whatever.
Maybe we
there's
could-
so many free apps that you can just download onto your phone that are maps. I think locally a lot of people use Mapperka, but I've used my Gaia app at Illahee and at Madrona Trails.
Because if you use Google Maps within Illahee, a lot of times there's no reception. It doesn't.
You don't even need, you can have an airplane mode, once you download the map.
We're all talking about maps and how to get around with them. And there are, in Illahee, there are numbers and they can be helpful. And so you could do numbers starting with 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Then I think we're gonna probably take 2 more questions and then maybe 3. Okay. You started with you and then you. And then,
Oh, 4.
go ahead.
I thought there was somebody behind me. I always see Madrona leaning way over. I wonder about the roots. When the tree leans to the left, do the roots go to the right? Is there a taproot that goes?
Oh, that's a great question. I do not know the answer to that.
It's just how madrones can balance themselves because they lean so far.
They lean so far, yeah.
What are the roots doing?
Yeah, and then they certainly have an intricate route network clearly that goes fairly deep. Within Madrona Trails, interestingly, one of the more shallow conifer root systems is and we've seen a lot of them go down, is the western hemlock. We've seen in even not too great of windstorms, they tend to fall down. I don't think that Madronas are like that. I think that they must just anchor themselves so well into the ground with such dense wood. That's my best guess.
Well,
Again,
especially if they're dense and heavy.
Yeah. yeah, it would be fun to map and find out how deep they go.
Brian next.
This is not about Madrona trails, but it is about urban forests.
Okay.
And it's not, I'm not trying to put you on the spot about this, Josh. I'm sure you've heard about the forest that is over near Trenton. East of Trenton, south of 30th.
I have.
It's privately owned. The city of Bremerton recently voted to extend sewer. The ability to install sewer services or access the city's sewer system
It's in the
to
entire
those property owners for eventual development. And I've never been in those woods myself. I've often been around them. And I've thought, gosh, this would be a great park.
Gotcha, yeah.
It's already purchased by a couple on Bainbridge Island and they wanna, I always feel like this is poop in somebody else's yard. They don't wanna take their trees out on the island, but they'll go over to Bremerton and they're gonna take all the trees out. They wanna put almost 200 houses in there.
Okay.
And by hook city hookup, they'll
Right.
have the ability to do that unless the county says no.
Okay, I got this, Jill. I
Got
got
it.
Okay, so we had a comment asking about the patch of woods that's between East 30th and Trenton. And that has been purchased. There is there's a plan to create single family housing there. That's my understanding. It's within the UGA. I think it's called the Enitai UGA. So and there is also, it's not within the city, so the city's only role really is getting sewer out to what is a development that you just can't put a whole bunch of septic systems on, is my understanding. And it is a beautiful forest. I have never gone through, I've never toured it myself.
It's a beautiful trail. There's
but
somebody named
some-
it. I don't know.
Right there, I have heard that as well. And I've heard also the comment about that. And I wonder, this is so, rather than just like, the circumstances surrounding, this is not an uncommon story, right? In Kitsap County, there's always a forest that's next up. We are also desperately in need of housing.
But I'm sorry, there is other ways to
I know,
make housing.
I know, but okay, well, that's fine. And we can debate this till the cows come home, but my only point on this is I do find it interesting that within the planning document that Washington State subscribes to, the Growth Management Act, was created late 1980s, early 1990s. And we have seen a lot of science around the fact that urban trees are just so important in communities. And I wonder how much that new science and essentially way of thinking is reflected in the planning and the documents. I am myself curious about that. And again, I don't know enough, but just to comment on that, I am interested in what and how much of a priority we place.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Thank you.
I think that so many people have shown interest here in walking in Madrona Park that we could send out, if you want your email, you said that,
Please.
so we could post that on the website and then you could contact and set up a private tour.
That'd be great.
And then maybe one.
Yes, I actually, when I was gonna speak about this, I actually was like, can we just do a combo walk and then talk about it?
Turkey work.
Yeah, exactly.
One more.
I haven't been out there recently, but Buck Lake out at the north end of the peninsula has a
Hansville.
set of trails. And
The Greenway, Hansville Greenway.
I went out there without a map and I used to walk it regularly. It's well signed. And the horses go certain places.
Yeah.
I always went where the horses went because I knew it'd be wider. But I can't remember exactly what that was, but it's pretty clear and simple and didn't confuse you.
So the Hansville Greenway, right? That's what that's called. Up
Yes,
there.
yes.
The Hansville Greenway, great, has a great trail network, and My only comment is here, let's bring that here and let's do that as much as we can here. There's certainly lots of other forested areas of Bremerton and of Kitsap County that there's an unlimited amount of needs in terms of invasive species control, in terms of just being good forest managers. The Washington State Department of Natural Resources right now is creating forest management plans for forested lands to better manage how essentially using things like prescribed fire. I mean, we could go into a whole other talk about how clearing underbrush and doing some of those things to make healthier forests. There's no end in sight, but I would encourage any and all of you who want to either get involved here or wherever you have a local forest, because I think we probably all agree, I'm just preaching to the choir here a little bit, within the church no less, that we love our forests, and we need to take care of what we have, because they sure give a lot to us.
Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation.